My name is Elaine Murphy, and the first sign that my role in my son's life had quietly ended came in the form of a wedding invitation, cream-coloured cardstock, with gold embossed lettering tucked between a water bill and a grocery store flyer on an ordinary Tuesday in March. I wasn't expecting anything special, just the usual stack of mail. When I picked up the envelope, something about the texture gave me pause. It was thick, expensive, deliberate. I opened it with one hand, while sipping lukewarm coffee with the other, expecting a real estate flyer, or maybe a charity gala ad. But when I read the words printed in elegant script, I froze. Mr. and Mrs. Jason Murphy request the honour of your presence. I had to read it twice before it sank in. My son, my only child, was getting married. And this was how I found out. No phone call, no visit, no warm moment of sharing big news. Just a formal card, like I was a distant cousin they remembered at the last minute out of obligation. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the invitation resting against a pile of overdue bills, and let the reality settle into my chest. Jason was 28 now. He lived in a sleek, high-rise condo downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and valet parking. I'd seen it once. Briefly. He worked in tech and made more in a month than I did in 6 working insurance claims in a cubicle that smelled like old carpet. Barbara, his fiancée, was the kind of woman who always looked polished, like she'd stepped out of a catalogue. I'd met her twice. Once at a rushed brunch, once at Christmas. She had looked around my apartment like she was afraid to breathe too deeply, like modest living might rub off. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th at Magnolia Hill Country Club. Black tie optional. The small print said, though I knew there was nothing optional about it. My best dress was 5 years old, navy blue, and bought off the clearance rack when Jason graduated college. As I held the card, my fingers traced the gold lettering. My heart felt caught between two things, pride that my son had made a life for himself, and the sting of realizing how little space there was in that life for me. I was invited, technically, but everything about the way it was delivered screamed, "You don't really belong." That evening, I sat on the edge of my worn couch with the invitation beside me and dialed Jason's number. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice flat and distracted, like he was scrolling through something or answering email while we spoke. I forced myself to sound upbeat. "I got the invitation," I said. "Oh, good," he replied, like it was a box checked off a to-do list. No excitement, no warmth. I said, "Congratulations, honey. Barbara seems lovely," trying to find some kindness to give. There was a pause. "Yeah, she is," he said. Then before I could say more, he added, "Listen about the wedding." I didn't let him finish. I jumped in, already moving toward the kitchen table where I'd left a pen. I'd love to help, maybe with flowers or cake tasting or just anything. I know how overwhelming weddings can be. His voice cut through mine sharper this time. "Mom, stop. It's all taken care of. Barbara's parents are handling everything." I blinked, trying to steady my voice. "I wasn't offering money, Jason. I just meant being part of it, helping you pick boutonnieres, maybe a mother-son dance." He sighed hard. "We've already picked all of that. Look, just show up, okay? Wear something nice, but not too conservative. Barbara's family is kind of traditional." That last part stung more than I expected. "Something nice, but not too me. I understand." I said, my voice calm, though my chest felt like it was caving in. "I wouldn't want to embarrass anyone." "It's not about embarrassment." He muttered, then quickly added, "Never mind. I've got to go. Barbara's making dinner." And then he hung up. Just like that. I sat there for a long time, the dial tone buzzing in my ear and the quiet of my kitchen pressing in around me. I looked down at the invitation again, the words "black tie optional" catching the overhead light. Optional. That's how I felt. Like I was optional in my own son's life. Not unwelcome, just unnecessary. And somehow that was worse. After that call, I sat in silence for a long time. Not angry, just hollow. I kept turning his words over in my head, trying to convince myself I was reading too much into them. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe wedding planning had him on edge. Maybe he hadn't meant to sound so dismissive. I'd repeated, "Just show up," in my head, like a broken record, until it felt like a command, not an invitation. Still part of me held out hope. Maybe he'd call back later that week and say he'd been busy and sorry. Maybe he'd ask for my help after all. But days passed. Then a week. Nothing. So I did what mothers do. I convinced myself that maybe if I just tried again, came at it from a different angle, things would soften. He used to come to me for everything. He used to trust me. There had to be a way to find that again. One night I dialed his number. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I had just finished sorting through paperwork and old receipts, trying to see if I could stretch my next paycheck far enough to cover groceries and maybe put something aside for a new dress. He answered again on the third ring. "Hey, Mom." Same distracted tone. I imagined him on the couch, half watching TV, half scrolling through work emails. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to sound warm like nothing was wrong. "Just wanted to check in, see how things are going." He paused. "Fine. Busy. You know how it is." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I was thinking, maybe we could get lunch sometime before the wedding, just the two of us. He hesitated. "I don't really have a lot of free time these days. Barbara's got fittings and meetings and stuff basically every weekend." "Of course," I said quickly. It was just a thought. Then I did something foolish. I brought up the mother-son dance again. I don't even know why. I think I just needed to feel included, even in some small way. "Jason, I was remembering when you were little how you used to dance on my feet in the kitchen," I said with a laugh. "Wouldn't it be nice to share a dance at your wedding? Just one moment, you and me." His sigh this time wasn't just tired, it was annoyed. "Mom, we already have the dances planned out. Barbara's got it scheduled with the DJ. Her dad, her mum, even her uncle for some reason. It's all kind of full." I didn't know what to say. "Right," I murmured. "Wouldn't want to mess with the schedule." He was silent for a second. Then, "It's not personal, Mum. It's just how things are now." That part hit hard. Not personal. As if not being included in your own son's wedding was just logistics, not heartbreak. "I understand," I said, even though I didn't. "I hope it's a beautiful day." "It will be," he said. "Not we. It." I tried to hold back the lump rising in my throat, but my voice cracked a little when I said goodbye. "Love you, Jason." He said, "Yeah, you too," and hung up. Not "I love you." Just "you too," like a habit he hadn't broken yet. I set the phone down and stared at the wall, the room so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not anger, not resentment. Just a slow, quiet understanding that I'd been left behind. Not by accident, but by design. After that last phone call, I didn't try again. Not because I gave up, but because I finally accepted what Jason had been trying to say without actually saying it. This wedding wasn't for me. I was on the guest list, yes, but only barely. I wasn't meant to be a part of the planning, the joy, the inside jokes. I was expected to show up, sit quietly, and smile for photos. And you know what? I decided I could do that. But I would do it on my own terms. If I was going to be treated like a background character in my own son's story, then I'd be the kind of background character who walked in with her head high. I wasn't going to show up looking like an afterthought. I was going to show up as someone worth noticing. So I got to work. I looked at my budget, which was already tight, and started making changes. I stopped eating out completely. Gave up my Saturday morning bagel and coffee routine. Walked to work instead of taking the bus even when it rained. I cancelled my cable, paused my streaming services, and started clipping coupons like I used to when Jason was a toddler, and every cent mattered. I skipped lunches some days and stretched dinners out over 2 nights. It wasn't easy. It was humbling in a way that almost made me laugh. Here I was, nearly 60, scraping pennies together just so I wouldn't feel invisible for one night. But I didn't complain. Because I wasn't doing it for him. Not anymore. I was doing it for me. By the time May rolled around, I had saved just enough. Not a fortune, but enough to buy a dress that made me feel like I belonged in the same room as crystal chandeliers and black tie smiles. I didn't go to my usual thrift shops or discount stores. I went to a department store. I'd only ever window shopped at one of those places where they ask if you'd like water while you browse. I felt out of place the second I walked in, but I didn't let that stop me. A young saleswoman approached me clearly, unsure if I could afford anything but to her credit. She smiled and asked what I was looking for. I told her I was attending my son's wedding. "Let's find you something unforgettable," she said. We did. It was a deep emerald green gown, simple but elegant, with a neckline that was just flattering enough, and sleeves that made me feel comfortable. When I tried it on and looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time, not Jason's mom, not the woman behind the desk in an insurance office, but me. A woman who still had a little bit of fire in her. I bought the dress, even though the price made my throat tighten. I chose silver heels with a low heel that wouldn't kill me, and a matching clutch on clearance that still felt like a small victory. And then I booked a hair appointment. I hadn't had my hair professionally styled in over 10 years. I used to do it myself with a box from the drugstore, trimming the ends when they got split. But for this, I wanted something different. Something that made me feel polished, proud. The stylist was a kind woman named Rosa, who listened patiently while I explained what I wanted. She added soft curls and subtle highlights, nothing too flashy, just enough to catch the light. When she spun me around to face the mirror, I actually gasped. I looked radiant. I don't say that to brag. It's just, I hadn't seen myself that way in so long. Not just decent or presentable, but beautiful. That night back in my apartment, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in that dress shoes on hair done. I touched the fabric at the neckline and smiled, not a big smile, but a real one. I imagined Jason seeing me like this, and maybe feeling something. Maybe he'd be surprised. Maybe he'd tell me I looked beautiful. Maybe he'd introduce me to his in-laws with pride instead of obligation. I knew better than to expect too much, but I let myself have that small hope, because even if the day didn't go how I wanted, I would walk into that wedding as someone whole. I wasn't just attending, I was arriving as myself for myself. And that mattered more than anything. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early, even though I barely slept the night before. My heart was jittery, a mix of nerves and something close to dread, but I pushed that aside. I took a long shower, steamed my dress carefully, and did my makeup with a steadier hand than I expected. When I stepped outside, the summer air was already warm. I had washed my 15-year-old Honda Civic the day before, hoping it might blend in a little better in the country club parking lot. It didn't. Pulling up to Magnolia Hill, I was immediately surrounded by luxury BMWs, Mercedes, even a couple Teslas, all gleaming in the sunlight like they'd just rolled off showroom floors. But I held my head high as I handed my keys to the valet, refusing to shrink in comparison. Inside, the country club lobby looked like something out of a movie. Marble floors, high ceilings, chandeliers that sparkled with a quiet kind of wealth. People milled about in gowns and tuxedos, chatting like they all knew each other. I walked slowly, my heels clicking against the polished floor, telling myself I had every right to be there. I scanned the room until I saw him, Jason, standing near the staircase, laughing with Barbara's father. He looked perfect. The black tuxedo, the crisp white shirt, the confident smile. Barbara stood beside him in a gown that shimmered with every step. She was stunning, like she'd been poured into the pages of a bridal magazine. For a moment, I just watched. My chest tightened, not just with pride, but with the ache that comes when someone you love looks right through you. Then he saw me. His eyes landed on mine, and his smile faltered, not from joy or even surprise, but with something that looked disturbingly like dread. "Mom," he said, as I approached, his voice flat but polite. "You made it. You look so handsome," I said softly, reaching to straighten his bow tie like I used to when he was little and nervous before a school play, but he stepped back just slightly enough to make my hand hover mid-air. "Thanks. You look nice," he said, and the pause before nice stung more than I wanted to admit. Barbara's father stepped forward and extended his hand. "You must be Jason's mother. Tom Whitmore." I shook his hand. "Elaine Murphy. Congratulations on gaining such a wonderful son-in-law." "Indeed," he said with a tight, polite smile, then turned back to Jason without another word. I stood there for a moment longer, then slowly stepped away. Just like that, I faded into the background. The reception was held in a grand hall that looked like it had been designed by someone who had never had to ask for a price quote. White linens, crystal glasses, towering centerpieces of roses and eucalyptus. Everything was coordinated and elegant. I found my table, table 8, all the way in the far corner of the room, next to the swinging doors to the kitchen. The other guests at my table were strangers, an elderly woman with a hearing aid, a nervous-looking couple in ill-fitting formal wear, and a few empty seats that stayed empty. We were clearly the afterthoughts. At the front, Jason and Barbara sat at the head table, flanked by her family. Tables 1 through 3 were filled with Jason's college friends, Barbara's sorority sisters, and the Whitmores' inner circle. It was like a seating chart designed to map out who mattered most. I sat quietly and tried not to let the hurt rise too quickly. A woman approached my table, mid-60s, friendly eyes. "Are you Jason's mother?" she asked. I'm Margaret, Barbara's great-aunt. Mind if I sit with you? I don't know many people here. Of course, I said, grateful for a kind face. She sat beside me and whispered, It's all very lovely, but not really my world. I know exactly what you mean, I said, offering a faint smile. But it's Jason's day. That's what matters. Kitty. We made polite conversation, but I couldn't help watching Jason as he made his way around the room. He shook hands, posed for pictures, laughed at jokes. He didn't glance my way once. I kept telling myself he'd come over eventually, that maybe he was just busy playing host. But with each passing minute, the hope I had carried with me so carefully, so painfully, began to unravel. Dinner was served with military precision. Waiters moved from table to table, silver trays and polished smiles. Our table was last. Margaret got her plate lukewarm but edible. Then the elderly woman. Then the couple. And then nothing. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. A young server finally appeared, flushed and apologetic. I'm so sorry, ma'am. There was a mix-up in the kitchen. Your meal will be out in just a few minutes. 20 more minutes passed. The room was filled with the clink of forks, the sound of wine glasses being raised, bursts of laughter. Eventually, a different server set a plate in front of me. The salmon was cold, the asparagus limp. The potatoes looked like they'd been scraped off someone else's plate and kept under a heat lamp too long. Margaret looked at it and whispered, That's inexcusable. I smiled. It's fine. I'm just happy to be here. That was a lie, but it was one I'd learned to say easily. And then, as I picked at my food, I heard Jason's voice echo across the room. He was preparing to give his thank you speech. But before speaking into the mic, he leaned toward Barbara and said just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, Did you see they finally brought my mum her food? She's used to eating what life leaves behind. She won't mind. Barbara laughed a sharp, high laugh, and a few others followed suit. I froze. I set my fork down. My hands were steady, but inside something cracked. Not just from the cruelty of the joke, but from how casually it had been delivered, like it was true. Like that's how he saw me. And in that moment, I realized maybe it was. After dinner, the lights dimmed, and the soft strains of music drifted through the reception hall. People leaned in, whispering, and smiling glasses clinked, and I sat quietly in my chair at table 8, hands folded in my lap. Across the room, Jason and Barbara stepped onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. They moved together like they had rehearsed it, gliding smoothly, perfectly in sync, smiling as though nothing else in the world existed beyond their shared spotlight. They looked like they belonged in a magazine, spread young, beautiful, and full of the kind of confidence that makes people think they have everything figured out. I watched from my corner, trying to match their joy with a polite smile of my own. I thought maybe Jason would glance my way, maybe just for a second. But he didn't. His focus stayed on her, on the people who had always mattered more in this version of his life. The crowd applauded when the song ended, and I braced myself for the part I had imagined so many times the parent dances. My heart started to beat a little faster, a strange mix of hope and dread swirling in my chest. This would be my moment, I thought. Maybe it wasn't planned, maybe he didn't say anything ahead of time, but surely Jason would come over and offer his hand. Surely he hadn't forgotten. Barbara's father stepped forward first, twirling her around the dance floor with the grace of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. They laughed together, the kind of laughter that comes easy when the world tells you you've done everything right. Then Barbara's mother took Jason's hand. They danced slowly, sweetly, swaying in a way that felt deeply familiar, like a scene from a lifetime I never got to live. I watched them waiting, holding my breath. Then the DJ invited other family members to join in. Uncles, cousins, friends of the couple all made their way to the floor. The music changed upbeat now, inviting more movement. The floor filled with twirling gowns and polished shoes. But Jason never came to find me. Not even once. He didn't offer his hand, didn't make eye contact, didn't gesture from across the room like I had dreamed of. I just sat there, still, watching. My dress that I'd sacrificed so much to buy my hair that had taken 2 hours to style my shoes that pinched a little, but made me feel proud, all of it sat there with me in the shadows. The moment never came, not even close. Margaret leaned over and touched my arm gently. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked, her eyes soft concerned. I didn't answer right away. I looked back at the dance floor at Jason moving easily among his new world, a world where I didn't seem to fit. And I finally understood something. I wasn't invited to be part of the celebration, I was invited to observe it. Quietly. From the sidelines. Like a witness, not a mother. I turned back to Margaret and nodded. "I'm perfect," I said. And I meant it. Not because I was okay, but because something had finally clicked into place. I stood smoothing the skirt of my dress, picked up my purse, and walked toward the exit. No one noticed me leave. Not Jason, not Barbara. Not a single person stopped me or looked my way. I stepped out into the night air and took a deep breath. It was warm and still and full of silence. But for the first time all day, it felt like peace. When I got home that night, I hung the emerald dress carefully back in the closet. It still smelled faintly of roses and eucalyptus from the reception hall. I changed into an old t-shirt and jeans, made a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open in front of me. For a while, I just stared at the screen. Not crying, not even really angry, just still. The kind of stillness that comes when something big finally settles in you. I thought about Jason's face when I walked into the wedding, the way his smile had dropped like seeing me was a problem he hadn't accounted for. I thought about his voice when he told that joke at dinner, his mother's used to eating what life leaves behind. The words rolled around in my mind like loose nails in a drawer. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to scream or slam doors. I just wanted to be done. So I started typing. Not with rage, but with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The words came easily, maybe because I'd been carrying them around for too long. I told him I'd gotten his message loud and clear, not just at the wedding, but over the years. The ignored calls, the polite distance, the constant sense that I was something he'd outgrown. I reminded him that the $500 he thought came from a trust fund every month was actually me working overtime, skipping my own needs so he could live comfortably. I told him the credit card he used for car repairs and airline tickets wasn't a gift from some long-dead relative. It was me, quietly making sure he never had to feel the pinch I felt every single day. I told him I was done. I was ending the financial support immediately. I was cancelling the card. And I was selling the house, the one he had always assumed would someday be his, like it was a given. The one he had never asked about, never helped maintain, but always spoke of as my mum's place, for now. I told him the house was mine, And I was going to use the money not to take care of someone else, but finally to take care of me. I didn't write it to hurt him. I wrote it so he would understand that love without respect isn't love. It's duty. And I had carried that duty long enough. At 3:47 a.m., I hit send. No dramatic punctuation, no clever sign-off, just the truth. By noon, he replied, "Mom, what the hell is this? Are you having some kind of breakdown? I think you misunderstood what happened at the wedding. It was just a joke. Everyone was laughing, not just at you. You're being way too sensitive. Can we talk like adults? Selling the house is insane. That's my inheritance you're talking about." Dad would roll over in his grave. "Barbara thinks you might be having a midlife crisis. She knows a therapist who specializes in women your age. Let's talk on Sunday. I'll come over." I didn't reply. I read it 3 times, each time feeling less surprised. By Friday, I had changed my phone number. Saturday came with a second email, shorter, sharper. "Mum, I've been calling for 2 days. Pick up your phone. We need to talk about this house before you do something stupid. I talked to a lawyer. You can't just cut me out of my inheritance. Call me back." I forwarded that one to my realtor with a short note. "Please expedite the listing process." By Tuesday, the house was on the market. By Thursday, I had 2 offers. I accepted the higher one, $115,000 over asking price, all cash, 30-day close. Sunday came with his final message. "You win. Whatever point you're trying to make, congratulations. You've ruined our relationship and embarrassed me in front of Barbara's family. I hope it was worth it. Don't contact me again." I printed it and slipped it into a folder I labelled Evidence. Not for court, for memory. The closing was set for July 20th. I put down deposits on a small furnished apartment in Savannah and a month-long stay at a quiet bed and breakfast in Vermont for the fall. I didn't have to ask permission, check a schedule, or worry about who needed me. For the first time in 30 years, I was making plans that were just for me. And it felt good. Not flashy, not dramatic, just good. Like the kind of peace you don't notice at first because you're too used to chaos. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was just free. Savannah was warm in ways I didn't expect. Not just the weather, but the way people greeted you on the street, the way the breeze felt softer somehow. Like the city itself had a slower heartbeat. I rented a small apartment 4 blocks from the river on a quiet street where neighbours nodded hello. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I took a part-time job at a local bookstore owned by a woman named Rita. She hired me on the spot after a 10-minute conversation. "You seem like someone who understands that books are more than merchandise," she said. She was right. I spent my days surrounded by stories, and my evenings walking along the water, eating simple meals and reading on a second-hand porch swing I picked up at a yard sale. 3 months passed, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything. No call, no visit, no approval. Then one Thursday afternoon in October, Rita handed me a slip of paper. "A man called, said he was your son." Sounded desperate. I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket. 2 days later, Jason showed up in person. He looked thinner, older. His shoes were scuffed, and the circles under his eyes said he hadn't been sleeping well. "Please," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I told him I got off work at 6. The cafe next door closed at 7. He had 1 hour. That evening, we sat across from each other at a small table by the window. He fumbled through an apology, his words careful and clearly rehearsed. "I miss you," he said. "I miss having a mother who believed in me." I looked at him not with anger, but with a kind of stillness I had earned. "I did believe in you," I said. "But belief without boundaries isn't love, it's enablement." He asked how to fix it, how to start over. I told him he couldn't not, because I hated him, but because I had already left. He just hadn't noticed until the benefits stopped. When I got up to leave, I didn't look back. I walked into the soft savannah evening with peace in my chest. I'd spent 30 years accepting leftovers. Now I was building a life where I set the table, and this time I got to choose where I sat. There comes a time in life, often quietly, without warning, when we must decide whether to keep giving from an empty cup or finally turn inward and ask ourselves what we need. Elaine's story is not about bitterness or revenge. It's about a woman who spent decades loving deeply, giving silently, and putting herself last as so many mothers and caregivers do. But love to be real must be rooted in respect. When that respect is absent, when your presence is treated as optional, there is great dignity in choosing to walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. Elaine didn't stop being a mother. She simply stopped being someone else's emotional and financial safety net at the cost of her own well-being. Her journey reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim our worth, to begin again, and to build a life that centers peace, purpose, and self-respect. For anyone who has ever felt invisible after years of sacrifice, let this story be a quiet reminder you still matter, and you deserve to be seen not just as a role, but as a whole person. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments what kind of stories or life topics you'd like us to explore next. And if you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next heartfelt episode. Wishing you strength, serenity, and the joy of choosing yourself again and again.